Ready?
Yep.
Anytime.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Studio Sunday with Robyn and Terry.
Hi.
I hope last week was fantastic. Was it fantastic for you, honey?
Yeah, it kind of was.
Was it?
I liked it. We're here.
We're here.
We're here.
Let's hope that this week brings us all kinds of new adventures.
Yes, please.
We'll be in Chicago at C2E2 this week, and we hope to see all of you there. We'll be in Artist Alley, so just look for us. We'll be sitting at our table waiting for you.
I think everybody's looking forward to this show.
Yeah, it's the first one of the year. It's time to get started.
Yeah.
Just so you know, dress warmly. It's supposed to be a high of 28 when we land in Chicago.
I'm out. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
75 here today.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I still have a few things from our warehouse reorganization to put on the web store, and they'll go up next week sometime. So keep an eye on Terry's social media and the website to see what becomes available. I know there are some Peanut tribute books in there, a couple of runaway trades, and a few other things. So
Cool.
Take a look at that. And Terry, you'll post that on social media when we get them up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we did the Poisonelle's book this week, and it was nice to be able to get those to the people that wanted them.
So, what else do you have going on this week?
Well, I am drawing sketches for C2E2. I need to draw a lot. So I've been, drawing sketches like the girls here and some others. I've been posting them on social media, but not all of them. So I'll post them so people can see them and get their plan together for the show.
To make a run for the table?
Mm-hmm. Make a run for the table.
Okay. Okay, I guess we better get on with our questions.
Do you have one?
I do. The first one kind of talks about something that you touched on a few weeks ago. And she says, I know Terry mentioned previously that he hand cuts the 12 by 18 paper to 11 by 17. And she has a few related questions to ask. Do you use a paper cutter for cutting it down to size?
No, I do it by hand with my utility knife and
your trusty ruler?
My trusty ruler. But you know what? I did make a original template that is perfect, and it's got inked guidelines, and then I have that on the light box. So I'll take a blank piece of 12 by 18 paper.
Okay, so we've taken a little break, and Terry's tried to get his act together. His paper is not 12 by 18.
No.
It's 14 by 17.
It's 14 by 17. I have to do a show and tell on this one. So I buy this, and I get this pad of 14 by 17 paper, right? So pull out the sheet, and I put it on a light box, and on the light box, I have a template that is already perfect for 11 by 17, and then has all the guidelines. And then I put a blank piece of paper on that, mark it off, bring it back to the drawing board, blue line it, and then I end up with, as you can see, the blue lines that are guiding me, what is border safe, title safe, the edges to the paper and all that.
And then when you make your cuts, you cut on each side or just one side?
I cut on two sides in order to get the thing balanced, just so it looks nice when somebody owns it. And I leave the top as my true horizontal guide for everything down the page. And when I scan it that way, it's in the computer straight. I don't have to, adjust it. It's pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what kind of scanner do you use is another question she has.
I have a big honkin' Epson 1640 XL. And the one I have is the original one I bought because it has never broken. But they make a new one. It's the exact same model, exact same price, $2,000. And of course, it was a huge deal to buy a $2,000 scanner. We waited, several years, and it was a goal. And now you have it. You're really proud of it. So, and thank goodness, it has never failed us. It's just worked like a workhorse. So I highly recommend the Epson 1640. And it's, it's big. It fits our comic pages. So.
Okay, well, I hope that answers some of Patricia's questions because that was kind of convoluted for us.
Sorry, but the detail stuff is, there's a lot of details to it. But artists are into this. It's our tools.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, our next question is interesting. It seems that your comic book stories would translate well to screenplays, and I'm sure that's why your properties are optioned. But would you ever consider writing a novel?
Oh man, that's the hot topic around here. We've been talking about that this week. Yes, I would, and I keep telling Robyn I will, and she says you keep saying that. So the gauntlet has been thrown.
Well, actually, twice in his career, I've actually blocked off time in the calendar for him to write his novel, and I think he played solitaire on the computer for that whole time because there was never a novel.
I can't. Well, there weren't enough snacks. I can't. Who can write without snacks? So, yeah. I mean, you just have to have some sort of internal drive, and where you have to write the book. And as long as I've been making the comic, that drive is satisfied. So I've got to find a way to motivate.
But you are interested in writing a novel.
Yes.
And do you think it'll be with some characters you already have, or are you looking at new characters?
Well, obviously, I've had time to consider it both ways. I don't know. What would you guys like to see? Something brand new, or me fleshing out something that I've already kind of outlined in my Terryverse so far anyway. I don't know. Both of them would be a fun challenge for me. The risk of a whole new story is, will anybody be interested?
Well, you say that every time, and they always are. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. So. Okay, so look at that. We have a novel to look forward to. Is it going to be in this century?
In my lifetime.
Ah.
It'll be in my lifetime.
Good.
Because at some point, the drawing hand gets shaky, right? But I can still hit the keyboard.
Yeah, but can you still see the keyboard?
No. That's why you're here.
Okay, well, those are our 2 questions for today. Guys, I need some more questions, so email me at mail@abstractstudiocomics.com so we can put Terry on the hot seat.
Maybe we've answered everybody's questions.
Maybe.
There's nothing left but why is there air? We'll tackle life's questions next week. Okay, can we talk about art for a minute? We've been having requests about inking and how to ink with a brush and all that. So I thought maybe today we would take this pencil drawing and ink it with a brush and show you how I use a brush. If you've never had somebody show you a brush technique, it can be a mystery. So I can share how I do it and see if it's any use to you.
Sounds good.
All right, meet me here. Okay, so let's start by showing the tools that I'm using here. I use a Pelican ink. I just like it the best. This is an old bottle that somebody very kindly gave me, just full of ink. I like this older version of the ink rather than the new one. And then I fill it in with the empty bottle, squirt it into this thing, and I didn't know what this was for years. And it turns out that it's for escargot. It's for snails. Not something Americans normally know about, but Canadians and Europeans. A Canadian told me who it was, Doug Snade, the Playboy cartoonist. And I'm going to show you my brushes in a minute, but one of the other things you want to have is plenty of water to clean your brush in. And I just swish it back and forth like that, wipe it clean, and I'm ready to go again. When I'm done inking at the end of the day, I have brush soap, and I push it on the brush soap, do like that, rinse it out, point down, and form it into a point, and it's ready for the next day. I also have clean water that I use for the whiteout. You don't have to use a too much coffee man mug, but I highly recommend it. It has never let me down. And bleed proof, right, for corrections. But we're not going to make any corrections today because we ink perfectly, don't we? We never make a mistake. So that's the tools I'm using on my right hand. And let's go over here to the drawing board and get started. Okay, so here's when you're looking at brushes to ink with, these are the ones that we commonly use in comics. And they're actually watercolor brushes. They're sold as watercolor brushes. if you go into the art store and say, I need an ink brush, that's not a category. So there's the 0. Here's what they look like side by side: 0, 1, 2, 3, and a 6. Clearly, that's just for huge amounts of blacks. You might as well use a Q-tip, which is actually a viable option. So that's that one we don't ink with unless you need to do everything. The 3 and the 2. 3s are usually used for background inking, big blots as well. But some of the more stylistic cartoonists may ink with this just so they can get big, huge, fat lines. It's like inking with a Sharpie. And the 2 is a little better. When you read the comic advice from old school people, they often mention that they used a number 2 brush. And when you get it and try it in your little notebook, you think, oh my God, it's like drawing with a Sharpie again. And it's because the old school guys drew real big. So the appropriate, proportionate line, this worked when you were drawing pages that were the size of, back in the 60s. For today's stuff, I tend to use a 1. A 0 is a lot of work, and it's for detail work. This is the one I use for inking all my comics. It's a 1. And you'll see that when it's dry, it just looks like a makeup brush. But once you put it in the water, and if I get my water out, and this is the same thing it's going to do with the ink, and you put it over here and roll it into the point, and now you've got your inking point. And that's exactly how you do it with your ink as well. So let's go for it. I'm going to show you this very carefully. If you only want to go about halfway in with your ink, it'll travel all the way up the brush to what they call the ferrule, to the metal part. So I'm only going in about that far, and you can see that it saturates all the hairs. And then I kind of wipe it off a little bit, but if I go straight to inking now, it's going to be a big fat line that's full of ink, and it could bleed and everything. So you always have a working piece of paper over here, and again, you see my hand just does it by habit now. I'm just rolling the tip of the brush into the point. It is better to waste that ink than to take a loaded brush and go straight to the deal, unless you need as much ink as possible. Like if we're going to ink this as a brunette and I just need to start covering this, yeah, I can go straight from here to there. But if I'm going to start on this outline stuff, this will be your nightmare. So you come over here and you get off all that saturated ink until you get to where it looks like one of those Japanese brushes that come with that shape. Okay, put my ink back. Okay, so I inked the Kachu on my first take, and then when I watched the playback, I saw that my head was in the way half the time. And that's not a good thing. So the Kachu is over there to the left. That's take 1, and we're going to do take 2, which is the matching drawing I did of Francine. I usually draw Francine and Kachu together. And it's going to be harder because Francine is brunette, and that's a lot of inking, so maybe this will be better for you anyway. I'm using my number 1 brush, and I'm going through and getting all the strong lines that are in the pencil drawing. These will be guidelines when I get in there to ink the hair. You may actually look at a pencil drawing like that and think, how do you ink that hair without just blacking it all up, like a cartoon drawing? It's tricky, and it takes a lot of judgment calls, and it's just probably something you do out of practice. But as you can see, what I'm really doing to get started is following the guidelines that are in the hair to begin with. And I'm running this at 4 times speed right now because The real inking process took 23 minutes, and I know you don't have that much time on YouTube. So I'm using the brush straight up and down pretty much. You can tell that it's not the same angle as when I use a pencil. That allows me to get more flex out of the hair on the brush and get it down to a finer point. And when I first get ink on the brush, I look for the fattest line I can go work on. And then if there's something that requires a fine line, I ink that when the brush gets to the end of its ink cycle. I've finished all the outline work now, and I'm switching to number 2, which is a fatter, and it's going to hold a lot more ink. Watch how far I can go now without having to re-dip the brush. So now what I'm doing is I'm vaguely thinking of light and shadow, but I'm not real good at that. I'm not a painter. So I'm not Bernie Wrightson. I don't know how to keep light in my drawing all the time. So what I'm doing is following the hair, and I'm trying to keep some good inking definition between the big bulks of hair so that it remains lively looking, so it looks alive, as if it was underwater, you know, one of those flowy things that are underwater and look beautiful. You want to try to do that with hair. Unless you want the hair to be straight and blocky, that's another look, but that's not what we're doing here. There are lots of places here where you would see classic light sources in the middle of these big clumps where the lighting kind of burns it out. I don't do those anymore because every time I tried to do one of those, it looked really old school. So I've ended up with this, which is kind of Aubrey Beardsley looking. Those guys that did pen and ink and brush stuff back at about 1900 in the Victorian era. Aubrey Beardsley did a bunch of pen and ink. A lot of them were lewd, so you may not have seen them. You were protected from them. But he inked like this, and I didn't mean to get back to his style. I discovered him in high school, but I've ended up back at that style just because it worked the cleanest for me. Okay, see, there's a lot of little white lines all in the middle of that hair. I know that makes it look stringy. That's not real attractive. So I'm going to go back in there as my eye sees it, and I'm going to get that to look more like thicker hair and chunkier hair instead of a lot of stringy hair. I'm adding extra bits of hair to make it look more alive and not less stiff. And especially that line right there can look real stiff, so I add that little extra bit there. Okay, now I'm going in and blocking up where if you block up some of those little spider lines, the hair will actually look thicker. And it looks like I've switched back to the 1, and I'm going to do this little shading, these tone tricks on the blouse so that it's not just all black, black, black. You could have just blacked those in, that'd be fine. But then it's pretty stark. That's pretty noir. So I'm kind of going for more of a multiple tone look here. And I'm using kind of like, not cross-hatching, but they're parallel lines, but they change direction, and it just kind of adds a little more life to it. And now that the brush is dry, I can go in there and do those little bitty things. Those little touches there. Now the hardest part of all, writing in cursive with a brush. Do your signature, and that's it. We're good to go.
Okay, well, you guys have a great week, and we'll meet you back here next time. I'm going to go look for a Girl Scout to buy some Thin Mints.
Bye.